The next story I'd like to tell you is one that stems from some ancient Chinese wisdom. The story is about an old man and his young son who live on a dirt farm in China easily 4,000, 5,000 years ago. This story is attributed to someone who lived 2,500 years before the Common Era. And so this old farmer and his young son lived on this dirt farm in China, and the only thing of value they possessed was a horse. And one day, the old man woke up, looked out the window, and his horse was gone. And that morning, all of the neighbors came around saying, "Oh, what a tragedy." The old man just shook his head and said, "How do you know?" A couple of days later, the old horse came back in the middle of the night and brought with it 3 other horses, which the old man went outside and corralled. And the next morning, all of his neighbors came around and said, "Oh, what a blessing." And the old man said, "But how do you know?" About a week later, the young son decides that he's going to try to ride one of these wild horses. So he mounts the horse and it throws him to the ground and his leg gets broken. And all of the neighbors come around and say, "Ugh, what a tragedy." The old man said, "How do you know?" About 2 weeks later, the Chinese army comes sweeping through the countryside, conscripting into service all of the young men from the province. The idea was to bring them to the northwest provinces to fight a battle against the Hun, battle from which most of them will not return. The young son couldn't go because his leg was broken. And all of the neighbors came around and said, "Oh, what a blessing." And the old man said, "How do you know?" This is about time and perspective. This is about understanding that we have a tendency to judge events as they are in this minute without taking a look at the continuum. We have a very human need for immediate gratification, need to know, gotta feel safe, and staying in the sacred discomfort of not having an answer leads us to this idea that judgment is the way to go. This is right or wrong, this is good or bad. I've seen this play out in so many circumstances and situations during the course of my development. It's rather amazing. There was one night in the summer of 2008 when I was traveling to Chicago. And like normal, I guess I should say, on a July night at O'Hare Airport, there was anarchy. I don't know why O'Hare Airport is located where it is, except to say that it's near Chicago, that it has some of the most severe weather you can imagine in the nation, and traveling through O'Hare during the summer used to be this terrific adventure in patience, particularly at a time when the airlines didn't have a lot of direct flights from coast to coast, so you had to stop and you had to change planes somewhere in Chicago or in Dallas. So this one night I'm in Chicago. There are horrific storms in Chicago. There are horrific storms in New York. Flights are being canceled left and right, and I'm in line on the American Airlines line trying to get a seat on the last flight to MacArthur Airport in New York. Behind me was a young woman who was just absolutely beside herself. Beside herself. Because she had missed her flight. It had been canceled. And she was desperately afraid that she was going to miss her connection of a flight out of JFK. She had planned a European vacation for herself. It was the vacation of a lifetime for her. It was tightly scheduled. She just knew that if she wasn't couldn't get this flight, that her vacation was going to be ruined, and to say she was distraught would be an understatement. Crying, just crying over the fact that she had, her flight had been canceled and that she would not make her connection in New York. It was very sad to see. She was very upset. I did get a flight into MacArthur, and about halfway between Chicago and MacArthur, I called my mother, who was providing care for my 2 children at the time, and said to her, plane's late, don't know what's going on. They just told us they're redirecting from MacArthur to JFK. I don't know what time I'm going to be home. I'm not even sure how I'm getting from JFK to MacArthur. And at that point, my mother said, your flight's being redirected because there was a plane crash. It's wonderful news to hear when you're on a plane at 30,000 feet in the middle of a storm. Anyway, that plane that crashed was TWA Flight 800. The young woman in line behind me in Chicago had a ticket on that flight. And because she missed her connection in Chicago that night, she was on television the next day being interviewed by a camera crew, telling them how grateful she was she hadn't gotten on that plane. 24 hours. Dramatic change in perspective. And you see, what I understand is that in my life now, I can't make an assumption or a judgment that what is happening is either a blessing or a tragedy. Because what I understand in my life now is that my higher power writes straight with crooked lines. I have the most amazing life today. I have the most amazing circle of friends around me. I have children that are just absolutely, I can't tell you, it's such a privilege to be their parent. I asked my higher power for all of those things. I never knew that it would end up looking like it does. My higher power writes straight with crooked lines. My higher power takes me to the places to learn what I need to learn in order to have the gifts appear in my life. It's sort of like this question of, I have this expectation that somehow or another my higher power is going to behave and solve problems the way that I solve problems. Sometimes I have this impression that my higher power is going to be that Santa Claus, like God, who's going to wave a magic wand over me and magically tomorrow I'm going to be different. It's not going to involve any work and it's not going to involve any pain. Yes, Elizabeth, have another drink. What I understand now is that I am every minute of every day on the path toward an answered prayer, on the path toward a miracle, on the path toward having in my life what I wish for myself. But it doesn't come overnight. It comes in steps. It comes in challenges. It comes in this understanding that the detours are the journey. And that everything that I'm looking for is in my life in this moment because I'm on the path toward it. And when I let go of the outcome and focus on the journey, not only do I end up in a place that absolutely makes my imagination pale by comparison, but I have an incredible experience while I'm getting there. God writes straight with crooked lines. Is this a blessing or a tragedy? Which comes to, again, this discussion of the continuum. 30 years ago, a man named Tookie Williams founded the Crips gang in South Central LA. Crips gang is not necessarily an organization that generates or derives a great deal of respect from mainstream America. And in his endeavors as a gang member, this man took the lives of 4 people. He came from a place where his life was governed by poverty. He came from a place surrounded by addiction. He came from a place of being a drug addict himself. He was addicted to PCP. And he took these 4 lives. And he ended up on death row in California for most of his life. Sounds pretty much like a tragedy all around, doesn't it? Young life wasted in the absence of positive influences. 4 lives lost in service to an institution that does not generally leave a lot of positive behind it. But something happened to this man. And when he was in jail, he began to write books. And these books became what is recognized as one of the most effective anti-gang programs in the entire world. This material is so effective, and this man's vision on this issue is so unique because of where he came from. He's been nominated, or was nominated, for the Nobel Peace Prize 5 times. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature. And he's been credited with saving thousands of lives. So was his life a blessing, or was his life a tragedy? And how do you know? From my perspective, you can't separate one from the other. It was tragic that those 4 lives were lost. It's tragic that this man put his energy into an enterprise that was so destructive when he was young. But it is an incredible blessing that his energies went in the other direction as he came to understand a little more about life, about the world beyond South Central LA. And his learning thereby transformed the lives of other people, thousands of other people. So, how do you call this one? Is it a blessing or a tragedy? Or how do you know?